So I'm joined now by Olivia Enos, the senior policy analyst at the Asian Studies Center over at Heritage. Olivia, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Hope you're doing well, too.
I am. I had Secretary Pompeo on earlier today. He told me that the Hawaii get-together with his CCP, the Chinese Communist Party counterpart, did not yield any breakthrough. In fact, he left it and immediately saw that the Chinese were cracking down on Hong Kong. Is that your impression as well?
Yes, I mean, I think the situation is very dire, especially in Hong Kong, where Beijing is now considering a new national security law that poses an existential threat to the freedom of average Hong Kongers on a day-to-day basis. And we've seen Beijing just chipping away little by little, and now in really a lot more significant and larger steps to really undermine Hong Kong's one country, two systems model. And I'm afraid that we're witnessing history here as that one country, two systems model has just really crumbled.
How will that manifest, Olivia, in your view, immediately and in the near term?
Well, you know, as I said, I think Beijing has really taken systematic steps to chip away at that autonomy. We've seen ways in which Beijing has interfered in Hong Kong's judiciary. We've seen how they've cracked down on protesters and how Beijing has just decided to take very swift action through this national security law. And obviously, the administration responded by saying that Hong Kong is no longer sufficiently autonomous to merit a separate status. And so I think, you know, the big question for U.S. policymakers is how do we make sure that we hold Beijing accountable while still making it clear that we support the freedom of the Hong Kong people? And I think that's going to be a really tricky act to carry out. But I think that it's something that we've got to be committed to, because U.S. policy in Asia has long focused on the promotion of freedom, has long focused on safeguarding human rights there. And I think that continues to need to be a priority.
Now, Olivia Enos is the senior policy analyst for Asian Studies Center at Heritage. All things Heritage are at heritage.org and hughforheritage.com. Connection to everything we talk about today. Olivia, Secretary of Defense Gates, former Secretary of Defense Gates, was my guest in hours 1 and 2 today. He said there are more than 200 statutes or proposed pieces of legislation cracking down on the Chinese Communist Party, kicking around Congress. What does Heritage think ought to be done? Because Heritage has always led the way in realism in foreign affairs and national security. Which law do they believe needs to pass?
Well, you know, I think that there are a lot of different policy priorities that Heritage has. And, you know, among them, and especially in my area of work, is a focus on human rights issues. And we've seen that Congress recently passed the Uyghur Human Rights Act, which makes it so that the administration needs to actually move forward with sanctioning Chinese officials like Chen Guangguo, who we know are responsible for architecting the system that has put at least 1 million Uyghurs in political re-education facilities today, and that's a really positive step. There are also potential... You mean
the law is a positive step, Olivia, not the fact that they've put people into the camps?
Yes, of course not. It's absolutely horrific that there are individuals inside of these political camps. I would say that this is arguably one of the worst human rights violations that is taking place today. But of course, China is not alone. We also see people in political prison camps inside of North Korea as well. And there's need to take action on those fronts as well. But of course, there's other areas of work to be done, including safeguarding the freedom of Hong Kong people. For example, if Beijing were to ever move toward having some sort of military intervention, we should be swift in our offering of safe haven and potentially refugee status. And that's something that is being considered on Capitol Hill today.
Are there sets of sanctions that actually will deter the Chinese, Olivia? I mean, they seem to me under General Secretary Xi to be fairly indifferent to American pressure.
You know, I think that there is value in actually targeting individuals and targeting entities on human rights grounds, on national security grounds, because you up the ante, you increase the risk to those individuals for engaging in bad behavior. And I think that's why we have to think about the sanctions tools that we have today. The sanctions of today are very targeted. They're not broad-based, and they're not intended to hurt individuals. They're intended or rather to harm the Chinese people as a whole. They're intended to target individuals who are directly responsible for those human rights violations, directly responsible for national security violations. And I think that those are a valuable tool that we can use to hold the Chinese accountable.
Secretary Gates agreed with me, we're in Cold War 2.0 and suggested it may even be more dangerous. 30 seconds, Olivia. Do you agree with him?
I think that it's a little bit dangerous to use the language of a new Cold War. I think that this is a, certainly challenging situation, and we do need to hold the Chinese accountable, especially for the way that they've mishandled COVID, for the way that they are undermining freedom inside of Hong Kong, for the way that they target religious persons, whether they're Christian or Muslim, Falun Gong, or anyone else. And I think that there's a strong need to hold them accountable, but we don't necessarily need to view it as being within a Cold War framework in order to effectively counter them.